Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this South Asian Heritage Month event as part of the LIT programme. And we are joined by Charlotte Ryland from the Stephen Spender Trust, and Sascha Ahktar, who is a poet and an author and a linguist, and Faiza Nguyễn, who is an author and a mother tongue activist who works with young children as well. And it's such a pleasure to bring this event to you tonight. We were just talking before we went live, and we realised we should be doing this with you involved. We're just having a whale of a time. It was absolutely wonderful. So welcome to Reclaiming the Mother Tongue, the Loss and Journey Back to Our Native Languages. Charlotte, would you like to start by introducing, well, the Stephen Spender Trust and what it is that you do?
Sure. So the Stephen Spender Trust is a charity that's been around for around 20 years. It was founded in the late 90s by the family and friends of the poet Stephen Spender, who was a great internationalist, a great translator, a great kind of opener of conversations, and particularly sort of focused on giving finding space for marginalized voices, often through translation and through publication. And gradually the charity has evolved into a charity that focuses on promoting multilingualism and language learning, and really celebrating knowing another language as a wonderful skill and an asset that can take you all sorts of interesting places in life, regardless of how good you actually are at that language. And we do this in two ways. Firstly, we run a poetry translation competition, which is open to everybody, currently everybody in the UK and Ireland of all ages. So we have an adult category, and then we have youth categories, which is what we're really focusing on at the moment, encouraging as many young people as possible to get involved in translating a poem from any language into English. And then relatedly, we run workshops in schools that use translation as a way of enriching language learning and bringing lots of other languages into the classroom. So we do picture book translation workshops, we do lots of poetry translation workshops, and increasingly we're bringing these together with the prize. And I think the final thing to say by way of introduction is that for the past few years, we've run what we call a spotlight strand to the competition and to our workshops, which is focusing on a particular language which is widely spoken in the UK, but not necessarily kind of foreground and not necessarily particularly valued yet. And we have a special prize for translation from that language. And we work with a translator from that language to curate a booklet of poems and to run workshops in schools. So last year, our focus language was Polish. This year it's Urdu, and we have the great pleasure of working with Sascha Ahktar, who has been running workshops in schools for us, and has also curated a wonderful booklet with a real range of Urdu poems. And we've had absolutely fantastic feedback from the young people and the teachers involved in this, and what a difference it's made to the young people involved, not only those who already know Urdu. And I think that's a really key aspect of what we do. We do, as much as possible, we work with whole classes so that we're not singling anybody out. We're enabling those who might have a bit of that language to kind of show their skills and to share that knowledge and that experience. But we're also giving those who as yet have no experience of that language this really wonderful opportunity to find out about it and try it out.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So on to Sascha, really. So so you've curated the booklet, haven't you, this year for the Stephen Spender Trust?
Yes, it's all been just, I guess it's one of those things that, you know, like Fiza was saying earlier about how you have these ideas in your head and you're like, oh, yes, Urdu. And then, you know, you examine the environment around you and you think of how you want to make a difference. So it really, with getting on with Stephen Spender Trust, has really been like, oh, and now I'm doing it. You know, these ideas that I had that, you know, returning, so to speak, this mother tongue. So from my perspective, that's what, you know, I'm doing is I'm returning this Urdu to South Asian mouths, because that's what I specialize in is Urdu. But then being part of this wider remit, of just giving everybody different languages, it boggles the mind really. So, and then I had the opportunity to do something that I think it was probably something I've always wanted to do, is just go and put all these Urdu poets together into a booklet, So it was, while making it, I was learning and I was listening and I was reading as well. So my language skills were also, getting, so I think every project, your own language skills also improve, just as a translator, as a, language activist, you're learning too. So I think there's always learning going on when you do language kind of stuff. So, I mean, we did the workshop with you, South Asian Heritage Month, where so the video of that is up, where we've actually looked at the booklet we looked at it quite a lot. And I even
that was
read.
Such a treat. It really, really was. And I love that you read for us as well.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all been just fantastic. I mean, of course, none of us knew that we'd be in a pandemic. So there was a whole other level to this, of I thought, I'd be going into the school. And so we were talking a lot about that, with other colleagues and all, about us being in and what that would mean and how that would add to that. But then I think as a result of knowing that I was going to be on video, maybe it pushed me even, extra hard, like perhaps I'm thinking, especially because, if you've never seen Urdu, for example. So I was always quite amazed when I've met South Asians in the UK initially, when I first, because I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Pakistan with a English family, it was a white culture in Pakistan. So, but I've always been surprised. It's been sad to me that, the Urdu was not sort of passed down, or the, Pahari in the case of, Kashmiri. So, but if you look at it, it boggles your mind if you don't know what it is, so that hurdle, how to present the language if you're not there in person. I feel like I learned so much in this last year, and it's not just about getting the working with the Urdu in the schools. It's about also going deeper in how you present the language, finding physical, because I thought it would be good to, and Natasha, we've talked about this, is about where in the body these sounds and language lie. And I think that's an amazing tool you can use, like make the sounds like in so g, g, g. We don't have that in English. So things like that, I employed things like that. But let someone else speak.
No, I'm just, I can sit here and talk to you all day. But it's like, I know that Fiza's joining us from Germany. Everybody, hi Fiza, how you doing?
Very well, thank you.
So you did another Urdu workshop for us as well, didn't you? And yours is geared towards younger learners and younger readers. And you've written this beautiful board book for them, haven't you? Kala, Billa.
Right.
Would you like to show us?
Yes, I'll show it to you guys. So the book is, I'm the author of this book, and my name is Fiza. I was born and raised in Pakistan, and then when I was 15, we moved to the United States. Then my husband ended up joining the armed forces of the United States, and then that just takes us to everywhere in the world. We've lived in Italy, Japan, and now we're in Germany. That's me. And so there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of languages that are around our family. Our host nation languages have priority over even English at times, and definitely Urdu, because that really gets put backwards, because we're trying to assimilate and live in a host nation. And then at the same time, my husband is Vietnamese, so his family language is Vietnamese, mine is Urdu. When we come together, we don't understand each other, so then English, automatically takes over. And there's no shame in it. And I don't want I didn't want my children to feel the shame and the guilt either. So we said, I'm the primary person taking care of them at home while my husband goes to work when they're young. So I'm like, what can I do to keep Urdu alive in their lives? And of course we got the food going, we got the festivities going, we got the clothes going for Eid or whatever. We dress up in our Pakistani clothes. I'm like, yeah, but there's language missing, and there's no grandparents around, and where am I going to find the community in a small rural town in Italy, or in Tokyo, and then now here in a very small village in Germany. So it's been challenging for my family to find find the home for this language. So I was like, I need to bring it. I just have to bring it somehow. And I was like, it needs to be in a small chunk so it's not overwhelming. And then also presented in a way where we can all relate as a family. But I was like, but it's not just for my family. I'm not the only one, going through this. I know if it's me, it's happening to gazillion others. So I was like, I have to make it that is accessible to all. And that's where I decided to put the transliterations in the middle, making a bridge between English and Urdu, where you have the visual, like Sascha was just saying, if you have never seen Urdu, you might have been hearing it and speaking it, but you've never heard it. It's it's something that's it takes you back a little bit. It's wait a minute, what are those scribbles? And especially, it's the script is very similar to Arabic. And, we have stigmatized this language with and associated with terrorism and the flags that we see that are terrorist flags and whatnot. And the association that somebody has who is not familiar with the script is negative and is stigmatized. And it's not something that peaceful people of this world want to carry, and for sure not me. And so I wanted to bring it in the most gentle and loving and colorful way, and bold, where it is here. And it shows that when you see this language, know that it is beautiful, and that it is gentle, and it is peaceful. Oh. And it has all the, and so we can change this whole narrative that we have associated in past decade, which is just so ugly. And we certainly don't want to carry that. And I don't want my children to carry that. That's for damn sure. So that's me, basically. Sorry, I might have talked a little.
Do not apologize. That was so beautifully put. So beautifully put. And I think you've touched on something that's really, really important here. And it's this idea of shame. It's the idea of shame around accessing a language that folds into part of your identity, and the idea of reaccessing our mother tongue if we've lost it already. And I'm of the generation that went through the school system in Britain in the 80s and 90s, where we were actively shamed out of speaking our mother tongue. So my parents are Punjabi and Sindhi. So at home, Punjabi was my mum's language, and my dad spoke Sindhi, but he spoke Urdu in England. And so they spoke in their own languages flying above our heads when we were little. So we would hear Punjabi and Urdu over our heads, but we spoke Punjabi as our first language. And when we went to school, when we were at prep school, my parents were terrified because the teachers there told them that we will hold your children back. They will not develop cognitively, behaviorally, emotionally, academically. And that is, you don't tell that to brown parents. That is terrifying.
Now,
and so
don't tell them it now.
Now, exactly. And it was so scary because they were just, you're at the mercy of the system, because at that time it was appropriate for systems of education and racism to function in that way, whereby you could be stripped of your culture in academic institutions, and it was fine. And so my mother, being my glorious mother, who has like 6 postgraduate degrees, like, I'm going to go train as a teacher because I don't think this is right, so I'm going to go do that, just wait here. And then she came back with all of this data, but of course by that point we'd moved up in the school system and the language was lost. And I say this to Sascha all the time, I feel as though my mother tongue was colonized out of my mouth. And for years it has just been this knot between my brain and my mouth, and I can't speak it. And it is this knot of Punjabi and Urdu. And it's a nonsense language that makes sense to me, but when I speak it around Asian people, they're just like, their grandmother's like, what's that girl saying? Please take her home. She's really weird. I don't know what she's saying. And I can understand them both when I hear them, but what I'm speaking is not a language. It is not a language. And so
but
my
it
brain
is a language.
But it is a language, absolutely.
It's you. It's your
it's
language.
something. Yeah, it's the Natasha dialect, isn't it?
I've actually told Natasha that if she ever, because she's, I've asked her to write down when these things come to her, because I'm very curious.
It's like the word for nose. I'm convinced that word is nodja. Convinced that is the word for nose in
That's the
Punjabi
beauty of
or Urdu.
language. No, it's ever evolving.
It doesn't exist.
Even Urdu is such an evolved language that has parts from Arabic, Sanskrit, Punjabi.
That could be a Sindhi word that I don't know,
right?
that I must have heard and absorbed.
Right.
That could be anything, and it's
in
so
Urdu,
bizarre.
It's
Nak.
Yeah.
Punjabi, I don't know. Let me see. I'll look it up while we're talking.
I think it's nak in Punjabi as well. So I don't know where I've got Noja from, but my brain has just gone, okay, fine. But when we've been folded, when these identities are folded into you, it is like having that there are expressions, there are entire sensibilities in one language, in your mother tongue, that can't be expressed in English. There's entire ranges of emotion that can be expressed with one word that can't be translated into English. And so it feels like there is another self standing inside you that has so many things to say and so many ways to express themselves, and is just mute and can't. And I feel that way 2 times over. I feel like that way with my Punjabi, and then in more sort of in a more removed way with Sindhi, with a language that we never spoke at home, but that was my father's language, that I know he wrote poetry in, that I know that is part of his language, that he even felt he had to make quiet to rub along in the wider Pakistani community, because his part of the diaspora was the minority. And there are layers of shame even that function inside the diaspora. My mum actually wanted me to tell this story during this live, and she said, do you remember when you were 3 years old? And because the Punjabi dialect that we speak, it's not written. And Urdu is the national language of Pakistan. And she said, you were 3 years old and we were at somebody's house and we were there for dinner, and we were leaving, and you were asking me what was happening, and I was saying in Urdu, oh, we're going home now, and in Punjabi you were just like, like, what are you saying? And she was like, in Punjabi, whispering to me, we're going home, we're going home, we're going home now, we're going home. And then I just went, but like, I was just like, well, why aren't you saying it this way? And just really just very confused.
Bless your heart. What is
the
a child
shame
to know?
dynamics? Yeah, exactly. Just at the shame dynamics at play. And this is something that English society has done, but it's also something we do to ourselves. It also exists within our own culture, that there is shame around mother tongue and written languages and verbal oral languages. But now, as time is moving on and we unpick all of these different things over time, how beautiful is it and how urgent is the need to hold on to these languages that we might lose because we spent so many years shaming ourselves out of, we're losing all of these dialects that aren't written because people felt that they needed to hide away. And what I love about the work that you are all doing is that even if it's the two of you, even if it's focused around Urdu, the prevailing sentiment around what you are doing is dismantling this barrier of shame around how we speak and how we want to speak and what that vulnerable person inside of us wants to say. And I love that you are doing it on an interpersonal level, and I love that, Charlotte, with Stephen Spender, you are doing it in an organizational and in an official capacity as well. And I really feel that we're at a nexus point here. We are at a nexus of change. And I've been speaking to so many people during South Asian Heritage Month that feel this way. They feel ever so slightly cheated out of another self, because this is a story that's all over Britain in the last 30, 40 years, all over. People that moved, children that are second generation that have lost their languages and then feel that they needed to hide who they were.
Yeah, I recognise so much of this from conversations I've had over the past kind of 3 years since I've been at the Trust as well. I mean, it's partly about breaking down barriers. It's also about breaking down language hierarchies, I think, because, you know, I mean, there are major issues with the teaching and learning of languages in our schools at the moment in the UK, but it is happening. But, you know, there's this totally misguided view that learning Spanish is good. But speaking other languages in the classroom is, you know, a expression of a deficit, is going to impact on your learning of English and of the so-called modern language. And so I think it's so important that as young as possible, we get the message across to young people that any language at any level is something so exciting and rich and wonderful that they should share with as many people as possible, and, you know, do as much as possible. And I'm not saying not Spanish and therefore Urdu, you know, there's space for both of them. You know, the younger you are, the younger you kind of exercise those linguistic skills, the more likely you are to be able to learn more and more languages as you get older. And it reminds me in particular, there's one quote from a teacher that has stuck with me so much. She's from, I live in Oxford, and she's sort of local to here and has worked a lot in primary schools with lots of multilingual pupils. And she talks about early on, so sort of age 5, 6, they're really excited to share any other languages than English that they might have. And, you know, they'll join in kind of teaching their peers other words. And then as they get older, she talked about them hanging their heads when they were invited to share that language. And she said their languages, their other languages socialized out of them, so that by the time they get to secondary school, they don't even want to acknowledge that they have it. And I, you know, that just really, really struck me so much. And I think about it so much with the work that we do, it's a massive loss. And it also just seems to me that it's because that's actually that's sort of quite a simple trajectory that happens. I do feel, and I am a massive optimist, and I have to keep reminding myself of that, but I do feel that we can turn it around relatively simply as well, you know, by making those tweaks as early on as possible, that we can revalidate that language and just, you know, bring it back into the community and make it something that's valued by everybody. And I think, and that brings me back to what Fiza was saying about, that was so interesting what you were saying about what is a culture, like food and clothing, and, you know, all of these elements of culture, which, it's really true, they kind of have always been there. And, you know, if I think about my own schooling, I was sort of, you know, that idea of like multiculturalism has always been there, but if you don't have the language in there as well, then there's such a risk of treating it as something alien and like exoticized, something other, you know. And as soon as you bring the language in, then you enable people to kind of inhabit it, so that they can experience that culture firsthand, rather than it always being mediated and sort of othered in that way. And so I think you're so right that it does just feel like the key, like the missing key, doesn't it? That, you know, we're sort of aware of other cultures, but if we're not accessing them through the language and opening up that access through these like baby steps, then we're never going to get there. There's always going to be this gap.
Right, because I feel like the stories are coming through the language. I'm sure you can, you can dress up, and I could dress up in a Pakistani shalwar kameez and step outside, and somebody would know that, oh yeah, she's Pakistani. But I have a story that goes behind, with the outfit. And that story can only be told through words, spoken words, or, written down, or whatever it is. So I think language for sure, is a missing key in the culture. And like, you're saying, like when we used to have the multicultural days or a week that, you're bringing in, what were people bringing in? It was the food and the clothes. That's it. They were bringing, they'll bring us samosas. Like, all right, here it is. This is what we eat. Well, no, that's not true. We do not eat samosas on the daily. But you know what? And also the clothes. Like, it's not just shalwar kameez. We also wear saris. We wear gararas. We wear all kinds of things and jewels and types of clothing. And the language is the same thing. Like, what else are you bringing with it? I think language is also something that need to be brought, and I think we're bringing it. So I think that's it's a good thing, and it's good to see the support that we're also getting these days. I don't think this would have been possible even 10 years from today, from the research that we didn't have, the courage that we didn't have, and I think as awful as this pandemic has been, it has also done some good work, bringing people together and seeing that really we're just, we're all one, but we have to work together with what we have to offer and all of that. And I think all of it, like Sascha was saying earlier, that, doing this language introduction and through like virtually is challenging. Like, how do you, like, when you're not in person, you really have to speak with your body. Like, you really have to like hop on the plane and go over there and then make all these, like, you have to speak with your body because you're not there to embody it, to work with words over here. So I think that's pretty good. But also going back to like English has been really a gift too. Like, look at the four of us talking here. We can't be like, oh, because we were told to like speak English, that it was the colonizers' language to say. Yes, it was, but then it also brings us together. Look at us, how we are able to converse today and then speak about our languages through this language. And yes, absolutely, there's no translation, like Natasha was saying earlier, that there's certain things that a word will capture in Urdu, but then there's really no way to put it even like a sentence or like a whole paragraph, and it still wouldn't be like embodying that just one word. And I've seen that in Italian and Japanese and German and all of these languages. And this goes same with English. I don't know why we forgo that. There's so many things in English that there is no way to even put it in Urdu, and that is the evolving Urdu too. That if you go to Pakistan now, they do not speak the same Urdu they did when I left Pakistan, and that is because of the evolution of the language, and we have to embrace it because we're taking these parts of English that we're like, okay, yeah. To say I love you in Urdu is a struggle that is undescribable. Like, try saying I love you in Urdu to your mom and dad, and it is
God, no, it's not possible.
It's nearly impossible. But how easy it is now to say this such the three words that are so embracing, and like the love that you can put in. And my parents never said I love you growing up. Not to me, not to my children, not to each other, never, because it's just like, it's just not there.
There's no compact statement.
That's love through service, isn't it?
You see, because it's very interesting what you said about the change of language.
Right.
Because one of the things that came up for me while creating the workshops was this differentiation between the Khalis Urdu, which is the literary Urdu,
Yes.
and the colloquial Urdu. And yes, I think of it as it's our English. You see, the Pakistani speaker
Yes.
has their own English.
Right.
And actually, the English speaking English person may not understand. So, and it's like, you know, Creole and all these other languages that have had the language of the colonizer per se. Like, it's all this beautiful meld.
Right.
No, as yet, nobody has yet written stories in that kind of subcontinent. Well, yes, in India there have been. We use this language a lot, but
Right.
the literary Urdu, you see, because when you look at the children's books that are written in Urdu at the moment that I have found, they are in the Khalis Urdu.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying, instead of like this cute little "I love you," "Te amo" is so much better, "Je t'aime" is better, you know. But in Urdu, it's like "Mujhe," I have the love for you.
Yes.
"Mujhe tumse ishq hai." Now,
Right.
your mother will not use the word ishq. 'Cause
Right.
ishq is a very like deep love. It's more like a lover's love, you know.
Right. It's a
And then
romantic.
it's a romantic
yeah.
love. Or the "Mujhe tumse pyar hai." I have pyar. Pyar is a bit cuter. It's like, you know, sweet love. But your mother, father, parents are
They're not
going
to say that.
They're
Yeah.
not going to say. But maybe what we do have are these in the names. You see, in Urdu, you have lots of names that are loving
Like
names.
John.
Like
Yes.
John, you know, which is like darling, but it is "I love you." It
Right.
means "I love you." It
It's
is
within the
John.
name itself, like Dadi Jan, Dada Jan. We're saying that to our grandparents.
Beloved. It's
beloved, absolutely.
You see, beloved.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
So,
And
yeah,
that's beautiful. Like, that is beautiful. And there are
Right.
ways of, like, this is the thing, and that's the nuance that you miss. And that's a really interesting point that you made before, Fiza, as well, that it's not that we're rubbishing English.
Right. No, we're not.
It's the fact that it's the idea of dual identity or triple identity, and all of these things can and ought to exist in tandem with one another.
Absolutely.
And the power that can hold when they do, because language is such an anchor point, because like we were all saying, when it comes to food and clothes and art and music and all this stuff, they are beautiful things, but language is the thing that weaves through them all, that allows you to understand the worldview of the people that created all of those things. It allows you to understand the perspective and the emotions felt by the people who create those things and wear those things, and what their perspective is. And I'm a very early beginner in Korean, and I'm not very good, but just what the small handle that I have of the language stops me from being a career boo when I'm learning, you know, when I'm listening to the music and when I'm watching things in my focus language, and I'm starting to get kind of swept up in all of the cultural the pop culture side of things, because I'm so rooted in my learning is so rooted in the language. Your appreciation for the culture, you don't objectify the people, you don't make a pantomime version of who the people are, because you care about how people feel. You know what the words and the language that people use are. You understand context. You understand the context of what you're seeing and feeling and touching and hearing and eating and smelling in such a deeper way because of the language. And it helps you understand your languages in a deeper way. And then it helps you think about, and it makes you think about the history of people in general, and at what point did these languages meet one another, because there are similarities, a crossover in words and sentiment. Like we have himmat as a sensibility, like be strong, you know, be stronger. In Korean they have himne. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. The same thing. And I'm like, how it's exactly the same thing, and it's used in the same context in the same way, and it's extraordinary to me.
I have some insight a little bit into that, because in my work as a poet, it began with this obsession with language. and this idea of the tower, like the Tower of Babel, where all languages but then building on that, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where you have the
Babelfish,
station, and you just put it in and everybody can understand each other. And I've always thought that was fantastic. So when I looked into the Indo-European roots, and my first book is just like this it's very experimental, but it's like this idea of a Tower of Babel. So I've used all kinds of words, but what I found were these Sanskrit roots, that then had led to the Old Germanic and led to the Old English. And they do take you back to this idea of the proto-language. And then if you look at and I'm quite keen on I'm doing a lot of research into, the connections between like Harappan culture, and you see, they're not as distinct as they're made out to be.
Yes.
And I think that because I love going further back as well, and I think the key lies there. And again, the answers to history and culture, they come through language.
Right.
Exactly. I'm just going to pop my goggles on because I'm
you
a bit blind.
Deconstruct the language. There's a lovely comment that's come up, Natasha.
Thank you. So many wonderful reflections, conversations with Arabic among diasporas, shame standard versus dialect, etc. Many shared issues and emotions. I agree. It's an interesting thing, isn't it, that these themes they run through many different diasporas, and shame is the culprit. Shame is cropping up again and again and again, isn't it? And it's about how we deconstruct that, whether it's shame that is placed on you by others, or whether it's this internalized shame that is maybe due to assimilating and trying to fit into your host country or host dominant culture, and therefore you hide away from who you are. And it's an interesting thing.
I think, Natasha, you found me through during the time when I was doing a series of IG lives for World Read Aloud Day, and I had people from as many people that I could find from that spoke different language, and I would read a fun children's book, a pictures book in English, and they would then translate it sentence by sentence or thought by thought in their respective language. And a dear friend of mine who is an Afghan refugee and is in the United States, she said the same thing, that there was so much shame, and then she was told not to speak her Farsi growing up, and so and then her parent, like basically the same thing that you went through, and then the parents were like, okay, let's just speak English so that way you can go to school, and we carry on. It wasn't until she was in middle school and all these new Afghan refugees were coming in, and they were like forming their clique, and they would speak in Farsi, and she's like, man, I know I'm one of them, but dang, I can't really speak it. So she's just so she took it upon herself, and I think there's so much of it has to do with the attitude within. That she took it upon herself not speaking this language growing up in the United States in San Diego, California. And then later on in late middle school, she said, wait a minute, I look like them. I feel like I'm one of them. I want to be with them. So she took it upon herself with all the shame and whatever that was going to come with it. She knew it was going to be challenging, because when she goes and hangs out with these people who speak Farsi fluently, they're not going to just welcome her. They're going to make fun of her when she's trying to say certain things. And then when she's trying to go back to her family, then they're like, what are you trying to be? You're not them. You're us. And then, there's going to be division between her, English speaking friends and then the Farsi speaking friends. And she's like, hold up, wait a minute. I'm going to be both. And I'm going to be good at both of them. This woman today is running for a city council member.
Yay! Love that.
So it goes to show you that it is all from the attitude within. Like, you take it upon yourself, and you can go wherever you want to go with the language, with the culture. You embrace however you want to embrace, but it's the attitude. It's the shame that you have to literally dig out of your soul and put it in the trash and then take on the challenge and then fight for it. You have to show up to these groups where that there will be shame, and you say, look, I'm trying, and watch me grow. And you have to, like, put all that effort into it. And it's just so remarkable to see examples like that. I would have never known. I would have never known this until she's like, spoke that to me. I always spoke to her in English because, I don't know. I mean, I love a little bit of Farsi, anything what I know from, being around my Afghan friends, just hello, how are you? I'm good. And, if the foods, and that's basically my limited Farsi. But it's so beautiful to see that people can and will take these big social challenges and lingual challenges upon themselves and show up big, and show up strong, as long as they are willing to put that shame and all the other nonsense that comes with it. It was just so beautiful to see.
We do shame so well in England, Fiza. We do it so well.
So in Desi culture too. I mean,
you're right, exactly. It's a shame sandwich, and you're just in the middle going, why? Like, it's just...
You really have to be a fighter. You really do have to be a fighter if you're going to do this work.
The real shame is the fact that we've let English push out other languages. That's what I'm so ashamed of.
That's what I was coming to. That we
English speaker. But the other thing I did want to say with Fiza's example just now is that the key in that is duality, isn't it, or multiplicity? That the person you're talking about, they were like, I'm not going to be one or the other. I'm going to be both, and that is exactly what the message that needs to get through to the young people in our schools.
You can code switch
from the beginning,
right?
Code switching, exactly, and they kind of know they're doing that, but it's not validated or
no, it isn't. It's not validated as a skill. That's the thing.
Exactly,
it's not actually acknowledged as a skill until much later in life, where it increases your pay grade, and we acknowledge it professionally, but we don't acknowledge it when it crushes the self-esteem of children, and that is the deficit, and that is terrifying.
And I do think
that is commercially viable later. I'm so sorry, carry on.
No, just what you were saying earlier on about how the language enables you to sort of inhabit another perspective and really to experience that piece of that work of culture from within. I do think that is why why I am so obsessed with translation, and why the Stephen Spender Trust and other projects that I'm involved in, we really focus on translation, because I mean it gets a bad press, translation, still, because it's kind of viewed as quite a transaction, quite a dry transaction. But it's the translator, to me, is the most sensitive reader, and talking about translation is a way to have a really sensitive, detailed conversation about something that's happening in a culture, because what you're basically talking about is how the mediation happens from one language to another, and how to explain what's happening in another person's mind. And you're sort of using all the linguistic tools available to you to do that. And so it just engenders the most fascinating conversations. I was looking earlier on at a project that we did last year called Poems from Home, where a wonderful poet we work with called Cheryl Moskovitz curated this little project where she talked to a mother who lives in London, who grew up speaking Turkish, and her, I think, 10-year-old son, and they translated a poem together, a Turkish poem into English, and Cheryl talked to them about the translation process. And it's just so interesting to see what insights into language and into Turkish culture this 10-year-old boy came out with just through talking to his mum about this really short poem. And it's maybe I was thinking about it when you were talking about how to say I love you, because at the beginning of the conversation they're saying that the title of the poem is Mother in Turkish, but they're talking about all the different ways that you could translate that into English, mum, mummy, mum, and all the connotations that has, and that just gave rise to this really interesting conversation about relationships. And I do just think that, again, that quite simple act, or what can be quite a simple act of translation, is just such a way of opening up that access that we've been talking about, and making it accessible, and making it, allowing you to feel like you belong in that culture, regardless of how, like, where you're coming at it from.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it's also accent. So a lot of the South Asian, British community, and I know a lot of them because there's been a lot of inter travel, like between Pakistan. So, a lot of my friends, I mean, they may well speak some Urdu, but it's the accent. So they don't want to speak to the native Urdu speaker because they're ashamed again or embarrassed about the accent. But there's this Urdu scholar and translator, Haider Shabazz, and he's been talking a lot about this. Because there's a lot of snobbery within Urdu in the the Urdu literary, like the very snooty Urdu literary part. So this is not. It's the same with English. This is not proper English. This is not proper Urdu. But he's been talking a lot about this. Is that no, there's because of colonialism and all the effects of that, we need to stop with this whole thing of the correct Urdu and the correct way of speaking, because I hadn't spoken Urdu in a while, and I was doing this video where I was reading out all these Urdu poems, and I noticed that my accent had changed a little bit, and I was sounding more like the people that and I was also complicit in this, but I'm different because in my family there's white and Pakistani represented, so we all make fun of each other. So it's like a whole thing. I'm, but I noticed that I was talking like, more like an English person reading the Urdu. And somebody emailed me and she said, "How could you have done that? And you should have asked me. And I would have told you." And, I was petrified of the Urdu literati coming and ganging up.
Oh my goodness me.
But Heather is amazing. And he just said, bollocks. He said, bollocks to that.
Right. I recently received a review for my book saying the same, that it sounds like it was a book written in English first and then translated in Urdu because it's poorly translated. So there, and this is, I kid you not, this is a children's book, literally a sentence a page. And you cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong.
But was this like a Pakistani?
Who are these people?
I'm assuming so. And so literally, like, you look at the page and there's a cute cat waking up and it just says, "Woke up in the morning, utta tha subha mein."
And Kala Billa utta tha subha mein aur kehta tha subha shab khair, subha bakhair.
Yeah, subha bakhair.
What's the sorry, no.
No, I mean, but
what's the beef?
Right, what's the beef? The critics are there, but
I love that. Charlotte, it's your turn to say what's the beef.
Right, but you see, the critics are there. The critics will always be there. But you like I said, we have to and we must let these languages evolve. The English we speak today is not the English that was spoken 100 years from today. And the Urdu and any other language, with the world the way it is, that the way that people are coming together and putting these languages together, words together, it is such a beautiful thing to like carry on. And then you hear something like, how could you roll out your R's when you are speaking Urdu? And it's like, give me some grace. I haven't spoken Urdu in 13, 15, 20 years. I am trying my very best.
I'm trying, mate. What are you doing?
Absolutely. But you have to give it, you have to receive it with grace, but you also have to reciprocate with grace as well, that, this person is evolving on a different speed. And I am evolving on a different speed. And so it's everybody has their space and perspective. Which one is right?
I had my granny who was obsessed, who was, all about the Queen's English, telling me, what happened to your accent when I went to Pakistani boarding school and started speaking English less like, the way she wanted me to. So I've had people always
Right.
like,
Same, always, but you have to take it with a lot of grace, and then you build a thick skin around it too.
Yeah.
When you have been like told so many times that there's certain things that you're not saying right, or you're not sounding Pakistani, or now you're not sounding American, and I get that all the time. It's like, my gosh, so I
which one is enough for you?
Which one is enough for you? Like, right?
Which one?
But
what do you want me to like pull off an arm and not be not be Pakistani enough for you, or do you need me to be more British? Which is it? Well, when will you be satisfied? It's
that sort of that view that fuels the problem. One of the problems that we have with languages in this country, that like if you're not speaking fluently, then you're not a linguist, and that don't even bother trying. And I sometimes German is my main other language that I learned at school and that I speak, and I sometimes feel almost like pride in my English German language accent, because it kind of shows that I've made the effort to learn it from scratch, and and I'd rather I'm totally like comfortable with that, and I don't necessarily feel like I want to sound like a German person. I'm totally comfortable with sounding like an English person speaking German, because I love the fact that I can do it. I just feel like what a massive privilege to be able to do that. And so I just, it frustrates me so much that, like you say, Fiza, that the language police that you're getting,
and you're understood, and that's good enough. You're understood.
Do you understand me? Well then, that's fine.
Right, even like sign language, it is so huge and like underrated. I don't know. I mean, because I think I've lived in so many different like countries where language was always like, okay, this is a brand new language, not remotely related to each other, and now I need to use a lot of my hands, to try to like point at things, and like, okay, like there was a lot of like hand gesture that was happening, and so it's like, who's to say? As long as you are able to understand me, I think we're good. That is what more? Of course, we want to be better. We want to take as much as we can, and we want to improve. So, my children, now that they're, they've always been around English mostly. They also go to English schools, and there's certain things that are not rolling out of their mouths. And recently, it was the r sound, like as in bari is a big, is r, and it's just not rolling out. And I'm like, this is cute, but and fun, and I don't want to like shame you that it's not barley or they're like, they put L with it, and sometimes my daughter will just like give it up and just put a D. It's like, it's buddy, or it's like, it's buddy, and then sometimes she'll be so funny, she'll be like, it's bali, and it's like, okay, you know what, I see that, it's cute and whatnot, but let's try to work on it and try to like see how can we make this better. It's not a personal attack by all means. When somebody is writing reviews or my book like that, or somebody's calling you on that, it is not a personal attack. I think they might be coming from a good place. Just as a mother, I'm coming from a good place. I'm trying to be like, okay, it's a let's practice it, say it a million times, and then try to like find other words, and like like working with our tongues and our hands. Is like, do this with your tongue, and then it'll come out. And eventually it did. My son is able to say that sound now. My daughter is still working with it, but
done.
But you have to make it fun, and you still have to encourage it. But I think it's how somebody like says it, right? This person who came to you and said it, like, it came as like an insult almost. It's like, dude, I'm trying.
Tool of shaming. That's
not. It is a tool of shame. It's not constructive.
Because she's, the doyen of
right.
And I must.
And we're just commoners, disgusting peasants.
I find that so funny, though. I find it so
But we
funny.
Must try, and we must encourage.
We reward fluency in adults. We don't reward effort. We don't reward passion. Yeah. We don't reward commitment. We don't reward just enthusiasm.
Yeah.
We do reward that in children, and we put so much encouragement and nurturing there when it's in the right when the right people are around you. That's what we do. Right. And when we're trying to encourage children to learn in their focus language, but we shame adults for this.
But it doesn't come out
and adults
right.
that are returning to their mother tongue or have lost a part of their pronunciation, they need the same amount of encouragement. You need the same amount of love and open, and we are so, people get so bullish around languages, and I find it so peculiar, and I don't know where we've learnt this quality.
Awful behavior.
And it transcends all countries. We do it as it's human behavior. I don't know where we've learnt to do this or why we do it.
Well, it's bad behavior, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, you know, if it was just written, because it was a written review, if it was written, I would have received it very well. It's like, yeah, actually the book was written in English first, because it is my primary language now, and then it was later translated, but I also consulted with PhD Urdu speakers in universities to make sure that I'm doing it all right. But they don't know that. But what made it worse was that 1 star that came with it. Then I knew that this is a negative comment. If this came with the 5 stars, I would have received it very gracefully. And well, and then, and reciprocated accordingly. But, it's just the same thing. The tone that it was spoken to Sascha or many others, like, I'm sure you speaking German, Charlotte, I'm sure you might have encountered the similar scenario. I mean, Natasha, same goes for you. It's a similar story that many of us share, but I think it's not what is being said, it's how it's being said.
Exactly. Like, my Korean is with a Punjabi accent, and I don't care. Like, I'm just like, I learned the alphabet and I'm saying it, and it's actually helping me with Punjabi. So I'm here, and I'm just, it's an A for effort.
And I'm gonna get better. And I'm gonna get better.
It has to be with that enthusiasm, but that comes from years of unlearning the shame and being silent, and that took so long to unlearn. And like you say, you have to stand up and go, oh no, I'm not going to take it anymore. It took me 30 plus years to do that. It took me such a long time. And there are so many adults that fold that away and won't access it again.
Sorry, I just want to say though, Fiza, this review that we have just spoken of, translation is a subjective art.
Yes.
The choices we make in translation are very much part of the art of the translator.
Please respond to the review, Sascha.
The reviewer is listening.
View. What do they mean? It sounds like it's been translated from that is a subjective view, and it actually makes no sense.
So this
Y'all
is a
are
whole
my friends.
This is a whole
There are foes out there.
I find this so fascinating because it's a real issue. That criticism of translations is all over. You'll see it everywhere now that we've started talking about it. People find it very, very easy to criticize a translation, and they find it much easier to say what's bad about the translation rather than what's good about it. And I think that's why they jump to the criticism, because they're like, oh, that comma should be in a different place or something. And there's been some really interesting exercises with, in a workshop where you give people a series of passages and say which of these are translations and which of them were originally written in English. And you include Ulysses, a bit of Ulysses or something. Everybody's like, oh, that's a dread. Look at the syntax in that. What a dreadful translation. And of course, it's one of the greatest works of English literature. And those kinds of things. I mean, that's an extreme example, but those kind of things just really show that as Sascha says, it's not about. It's not something that you can criticize sort of objectively in that way. It's a subjective experience, and that's why translation is so that's why translation is so exciting and creative. But it's really, but I do think it links to our view of languages, the fact that people are so quick to criticize. It's like it's almost like they don't want to acknowledge that it's possible to be multilingual and to inhabit those spaces between language, because it's more comfortable just to be like, well, I can't, you can't do other languages, so I'm not going to bother. They kind of want to deconstruct that possibility. But if you read a translation sensitively, then what you're actually realizing is how much potential and possibility it shows, it displays and opens up. And knowing two languages, as we've been saying, you know, all the way through, it's like you're two people in two languages. You have access to two worlds in two languages, and to two sets of people, and to like two sets of whole sets of possible friends. And you know, that's what languages are all about: possibility and potential. And you know, coming down and with any kind of objective criticism is just a complete waste of time.
Absolutely.
There is growth from it. Hopefully there is growth from it, right? From both ends. Both ends need to
well, this is why I think conversations like this are important, you know.
Very
this
much
is why
so.
because I think interrogating this space and where there is discomfort is really what we need to be doing. I'm so sorry, Sascha, what were you saying?
No, I'm sorry. It's just been going on round and round in my head, and I know we're gonna run out of time, even though we could chat for ages, it seems. But this Fiza had mentioned about the stories.
Yes.
You know, and I think we should just sort of revisit that idea that the stories, you see, because if stories are everything, stories are life, stories are memory, stories are growth, stories are evolution. So if you are unable to access, you know, these stories that are even like, let's say, a memoir that a family member wrote in your mother tongue or whatever, you know, I mean, how much more you could learn about everything from the story. So my sort of idea is that the more we put the stories out there in all these languages, you know, that's another sort of way to create this kind of unlocking of the world.
100%
is also, you know, so I mean, and that was part of my, I mean, it's weird, I guess my book of fiction, there's a lot of social conscience that's gone into it. I didn't really fully realize that, but it very much was about, and I mentioned this to you, Natasha, is return, like I included a lot of Urdu in my book.
Oh yes, yeah,
and
of necessity and wanting, because your characters needed to speak in their own language.
But I mean, I had rejections for 8 years, and people said take out the Urdu, and these were not just Western publishers, mate. These were also Indian publishers. These were also Pakistani writers who had only been published in the West. I was told again and again to take out the Urdu, and I did not. And then, you know, 12 years later, it's not even 12, it's like 15 years. It's like a million years later. You know, it took all that time for us to evolve, for the publisher to grow, and the people who, like, I was just waiting for them, you know what I mean? And then they sort of like, hell no, you're not taking the Urdu out, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and I wanted to go a step further. I wanted to have the Urdu in the Urdu script as well. But that would, but I mean, I understand.
I got you on that shot, Sascha. I got you.
My poor dear publisher, that would be a printing nightmare. I'm so sorry. We just can't do it. Maybe the future, you know, I'm hoping this will be the case in the future. But the funny thing is, what you were saying about the fight, Fiza, like, it gets bloody exhausting sometimes, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, so I fought for this book. And the funny part is that people like Natasha, South Asian community, I didn't know Natasha before she read my book. All these people have said to me how happy they are that the Urdu was in it.
I read it with my mother. I read it with my mum aloud to each other,
Natasha reads it over the phone.
It's how I get how I feel connected to her life, and how she remembers a time that
I get countless messages with pictures of like small children and like parents and grandparents bonding with their small grandchild or the new baby through this board book, and that there's language that is visually there and that is also verbally there, because there are so many Americans that are second generation American. They did have Urdu spoken in their homes, but then they never learned how to read Urdu. So with the transliteration, they're able to actually read it in Urdu. And then now they're connected with the grandparent to the second generation Americans, and now the future generation as well. So it's just such a beautiful thing that is very well received for the most part. But I already shared my bad
Yeah, but these
experiences.
stories that have come now back to us
Right.
after we've fought to put these things out there, and then the stories
Look at the ripples that they
they
create. Look at the
they
ripples.
validate the whole exercise. You
Mm,
know,
surely.
and this is a type of magic. This is an alchemy. These words, this your language being spoken out loud, you putting that into the world. This is something you feel in your bones. This is something that knits you back together when you hear your language out loud, when you
Oh,
speak
yes.
it out loud. It is, and you feel it in your body. It is
Right.
transformative, and it feels that something you didn't really know was missing before, or it just something aligns and you feel the most truest form of yourself. That's my experience of it in any case.
Or even the joy
And
it
has
brings
been
when you hear it. Like, you know, if
100%,
you were just
100%.
walking by on a busy
Mm.
street and you hear somebody else speaking Urdu, you're like, "Ah, my people." You know, it's like there's
Yes,
like a
and it's
little
that-
like sparkles of joy that
Yeah, I
like,
wish
you know,
I could
lights up in
bottle
your
this
heart.
and give it to people. It's that your bone, you hum with it, don't you? It's a physical reaction you have to this, and it is tangible. It is something very, very real. And the idea that being divorced from that seems like a travesty. It really does. It really, really does. And I applaud all of you for the work that you're doing to bring people back to this, bring
and the
people
work
back to
you're
this
doing,
feeling.
by the way.
Nah,
Sorry.
Absolutely.
You
To bring
have
us together.
By the way, this South Asian Heritage Month, it's like a massive bottle. You have been bottling it.
Yes, I must say. I would have to second that. This is amazing, and how long it took for us to be able to put this together. And when we did, we were doing it oh so beautifully that it is being received so well. Surely is a
it really
deserving
is
of an
lovely. It really is
applause here.
lovely. Right, we must wrap up, but I want to very quickly touch on two things. Could Sascha and Charlotte please tell us about the Urdu Spotlight, and then Fiza, I really want to briefly touch on Father Tongue Day with you before we go. So, yes, do tell us about the Urdu Spotlight, how we can enter, what children need to do, how we can get people engaged in it.
Okay, so the Urdu Spotlight is open for, I guess, the next 13 days until the 27th of August. If you go to stephenspender.org or Google Stephen Spender Trust, and then you'll find information about the Urdu Spotlight on our website. And there's a link there to the wonderful booklet that Sascha has curated. You just pick a poem from there, translate it into English using whatever resources you like and that are available to you. I mean, that's something else that we haven't touched on really, is kind of the idea that being a linguist is not about being a walking dictionary at all. It's about having access to and knowing how to use resources, and that can be your friends, your family, your neighbours. It can be a dictionary, a paper dictionary, an online dictionary, Google Translate. Use whatever works, and use your creativity. Produce a new poem in English. Write a little bit about what that experience has been like, what that translation process has been like, and you can submit it via our website. It's free to enter, and everybody aged 18 and under in the UK and Ireland is eligible to enter. Sascha, do you want to say a little bit about the poems?
Yeah. Well, what I'll say that we've not said, as Charlotte mentioned, is the resources. So my first book of translation, I really found Rekta to be such a huge help, and this is why we've sort of we've linked up with them for the prize. I highly recommend you go. It's REKHTA, and we've got it all in there in the booklet. In fact, many of the poems, they have an equivalent on the Rekta page, and you click on each word and the dictionary pops up. It's fantastic. And most of them have an audio recording as well of the whole poem, but also each word that you click on. It's just fantastic. It's been a great joy in my life knowing that Rekta has been out there. So, but what I also recommend is that, what would be great is if you do this with your children or grandchildren or neighbors, and of course you don't need to be of Urdu speaking. You don't need to be. this is a prize for anyone who wants to translate Urdu. So you could be a young translator or know of a young translator, and guide them to it. And there's poems for very young children, which are nursery rhymes. So if you've always wanted to know some Urdu nursery rhymes, but then there's also like very important, our political poets and our feminist poets from the subcontinent in there. So, and even if you don't enter or have a child, I urge you to look at the booklet and read it, and have some fun. Read it out loud or listen to it out loud on Rikta, and then try to read it out loud. I mean, that's what I've done. That's how I've always done it. I just try to read the Urdu, and then I listen to it or I would Google it, and I'd be like, has anybody read it? The best thing about Urdu poems is that chances are somebody has sung it. So that's a whole other layer of things. Oh my goodness, we didn't even touch on that. But I have talked about it.
Hey, we can just do another session.
We're going to have to get together
I feel
again.
like we can talk, but exactly. I feel like this can go on
Mushaira and the Urdu poetry, Hindi and Urdu poetry. Can that be another talk? Mushaira, which means musical evening. Because the link between poetry and music
and song
is,
absolutely.
Which is another great way of
so
engaging
much.
young people.
Bringing
music and singing into it is just awesome.
Exactly.
I think the other thing I forgot to say is that there are cash prizes for the winners, and we publish the winning translations in a booklet on our website as well.
So we'll celebrate you, and
Love that. Thank you so much, ladies. Fiza, very, very quickly. I remember when you and I first got in touch, I saw an Instagram post that you'd put up, and it was the day after International Mother Tongue Day. And I remember you saying and posing the question, why don't we have an International Father Tongue Day? Because your husband is Vietnamese and in your household there are dual languages. And I remember just thinking, I've not seen that before. And we don't really center the language of the father. And it reminded me of the language of my father that just wasn't a presence in the family, because it was the language of your mother is always the dominant language. And I just found that so interesting. And I was wondering if you'd done any more campaigning around that, if that's something that you were interested in campaigning more.
I would love to. Yes, absolutely. I'm very passionate about it because I think there's so much almost a burden, I would call, on mothers to be the caretakers and the raisers and all responsibility of caring for a small child or child in general just is very heavily on a mother. And the idea is that a father is going out in the fields and, doing all the work outside, while mother is taking care of the children and passing down all the knowledge that needs to be passed down to the next generation. So I think the word stems from that, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I think it is outdated. We don't live in the world where only the fathers are going out. We have numerous, stay-at-home dads or families that are both parents are working and the child is being raised by grandparents. So if it's getting passed down to the grandparents, are we going to call it a grandma language? We're not. And so we need to not so much divide the parenting. It needs to be there needs to be a shift in the language where we're not putting so much pressure on the mother or the mother tongue, especially given in the world we live in now. Then, if you just look at my family, there's a Vietnamese dad and a Pakistani mom speaking different languages and bringing them both together. We're struggling. And probably, but we're trying. We're trying. And should my husband not get the grace from trying and speaking the language, even if it's on the phone with his mom and the children are listening to it? Should we not allow him to have this space in this world of passing down of the mother tongue. And so I think there is being a different term being coined now, which is a heritage language, and I think I am a lot more welcoming of that, and I receive that much more pleasantly than I do the mother tongue, because you can call it a feminist thing or whatever you want to label it, but I think there needs to be a shift in the labeling of what our language, the spoken languages are, because of the time that we currently live in, and this will only evolve in that way. We're not going to go back to the monolithic or monocultural ways of living. This is a ever mixing a bowl of salad, so we need to distinguish, but also embrace all aspects of it. So I think because the language is being passed down just as heritage is being passed down, I think that is more palatable than a mother tongue to me. I hope that it catches on and gets coined and changed, but we'll see where that goes. I'll surely be working and vocalizing.
There's also there's been a movement over the past few years to start and they have started an International Day of Multilingualism. I think I've got that right. And the idea behind that is that globally, if you only speak one language, you are in the minority, massively in the minority, and that I think this movement has started in the UK because we have just such a weird view that monolingual is the norm, and it only is in this, and it probably isn't even in this country anymore. I'm not really sure, but I just think that's such a powerful idea that actually to be multilingual is the more normal way of being globally.
As humans, I think we just have the desire to know language and to learn language, and we are really intrigued by it naturally. Like Natasha is in her adulthood picking Korean. Why? She must wonder. Something must have intrigued her.
It sounds like Punjabi, and it started to unlock my Punjabi, and then I went for it, and it's been such a joy.
There's a story behind that as well, and it's and so when we are around different languages, and including myself, when I am in so many different host nations, I pick up languages.
Also, it's really hard to cook and watch zombie movies when you have to read subtitles.
Right. Yes. So I think language is just so beautiful, and it just bonds us together. And the more we know, I think it's only. It serves us better as human beings. We're able to connect to the next person on another level when we are speaking that language. And in my book, I've tried to do that, where I've put in things like I was talking to Natasha earlier in our last session about it, is things like simple greetings do serve us really tremendously as a community. When we have a Pakistani neighbor and we know how to say subah bakhair, which is good morning, and when you wake up in the morning to step outside to go to work and you see your Pakistani neighbor, instead of saying good morning and you said subah bakhair, best believe you're going to be getting served some biryani anytime there is biryani. And who wouldn't want that? And that is a bridge, that is just simple things like that. And it's language, and like you said, you don't have to have a PhD to be a linguist. You can know how to greet somebody in their language, and you would have already served the purpose of being a community member. We're all in it. We all care for each other. So yes, I will put in an effort to learn how to say hello to you, or how to count to 5 in your language. And it is not challenging, it is not shameful, and it's more togetherness than it is division. And I think that's what's the beauty of trying to pick up a new language. And it has served me well, going to different countries and living there for 3 years at a time. I could very well be like, forget it, I'm only here in 3 years. This is during the pandemic. Why bother? 3 years from now, I'm going to go back to, and I speak English at home, blah, 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 whatever. But no, I do put in effort when I go outside and I greet my German neighbors in their, in German, and every tiny time she bakes, she brings it to my house. And if I hadn't done that, would I be getting those cakes and cookies? Probably not. Do I want those cakes and cookies? Best believe. So yes, I would put in effort, and that to me is everything. I know.
I think you're like the queen. I think you're.
She's just great, isn't she?
I mean,
she's great.
This is an astonishing story
Really
of
is.
all these countries and this, succession of countries. It's. I want to be inside your brain.
There's a lot going on here. If you want peace of mind, please do not enter. If you want pure chaos,
Fantastic.
if you want pure chaos, we're welcome.
Oh my goodness. I feel like we could go on all day, but we need to cut it. It's nearly an hour and a half. We need to end the live. But this has been an absolute pleasure, an absolute delight. Ladies, where can we buy both your books before we end?
Oh, well, mine is at the 87 Press, the 87
Perfect.
Press of Necessity and Wanting.
Love
Yes,
that.
and mine is available at the moment in the United States and Canada on Amazon, and in Pakistan at Liberty Books. And those of you who are living outside of either of those 3 places, the electronic version is available on Kindle. I've mentioned before that this has been a one-woman show, so it's I've self-published this book, and it's all done on a very small scale, and I'm only at the moment working on my very first print of 500 books, and I'm nearly sold out within a year. So I think I've and especially given the pandemic, so it's been a feat. But hopefully, if there is more demand from different countries, I'll would love to put a larger order and get it in everybody's hands, and especially libraries, because I want this to be a publicly available thing. I don't want to colonize the moon with the money or anything like that. I just want.
But you're building libraries, aren't you? You're
libraries.
building libraries in Pakistan.
Yes. So because this is a self-published book, there is only a hole in a pocket. Instead of me making a penny out of it, I actually pay $2 per book that's sold in the United States, 3 in Canada, and 6 in Pakistan, out of my pocket when somebody actually purchases the book, because of the printing costs and all the shipping costs and all that is involved in it. So no, this is not for money. This is just passion project of putting the love of reading in small children, because that's also a thing that is not happening in. We think that people just read to their children because maybe we are around it, but the reality is that a lot of children grow up without ever being read to, and I would like to change that culture. My goal is to show that if the cat is as adorable as it can be, read a book, then maybe we need to incorporate that for a healthy development of a child. Reading needs to be an essential part of their daily routine, just as it is to get a good night's sleep and eat and drink and play. You need to be reading to your child for a healthy development. These are boxes that their parents or caregivers are supposed to check off on the daily. Did we feed our child? Yes, we did. Did we, was the child hydrated? Yes. Did the child get to play and was, got a adequate, just a good amount of sleep that should be there for their healthy development? Well, did we read to them as well? So this is the end of the book, and it leaves you with a quote that is saying, "Children are made readers on the laps of their parents or caregivers," and just to put it, quote it out. I want people to read. I want people to be, visually treated with by this different yet very beautiful language, and you have access to it because everything is written in English, but also written in English alliteration. So that way, even if you don't know how to read the script, you will be reading the book in English, and then in a different language that you might not be familiar with the tools of the familiar language. And so you get a treat of not only hearing it, but also putting it in your mouth. To
I
say.
love
So yeah,
that.
the book is available there, and it is on Kindle. But if there is a demand, we'll surely do another print with bigger volume. That's the hope.
Fantastic. And where can we follow you all before we close?
I have an author page at Instagram, Akhtar Sascha. No, that's Twitter. Twitter is Akhtar Sascha. Insta is Sascha Ahktar. And my book is also available at Liberty in Pakistan.
Perfect.
High five to that. We're sisters at Liberty Books. I'm at, I recently changed my handle. It used to be Littlest Literates, but now it's teacher_Miss Fiza, because I've also, through this book, I've gotten in touch with a lot of amazing people. And one of them is Hannah at Urdu Learning Lab. She's based in California, and she's trying to put together this program that is making Urdu available for children at the moment who are trying to learn a second language as Urdu. And I do story time for them, a bilingual story time for them, which is in it depends on what we're reading, but it is a English picture book, and then later and then translated in Urdu.
Oh my
and
God,
then
how
do
can
a
I come
craft
with
or
my
something? And yes, everybody's welcome. That is definitely not limited to just people in the United States. It's available to anybody, and then we speak both languages to make sure that we're all comfortable. We can just have both of these languages and provide a safe space for the children to embrace the second language that they're trying to learn and be part of their journey. And then all the 100% of the proceeds that I receive from that will go towards building school libraries in Pakistan. So we're working on, I'm working on that project on the side. So everything you see on Instagram at teacher_Miss Fiza is all the good work for the philanthropy, hopefully to bring a better future for our children.
That's amazing. That is wonderful. And Stephen Spender is, what is your handle as Stephen Spender?
So it's at Stephen Spender on Twitter. I think it's the same it might be at Stephen Spender Trust on Instagram or on Facebook. And I'm, I think, at Charlotte Ryland, mostly on Twitter.
Smashing. Thank you so much, ladies. This is incredible. It's literally become dark around me. I love this. I absolutely love it. This was an absolute joy and a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm going to end the live here. Happy South Asian Heritage Month. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.